calling all instructional coaches, curriculum specialists, teachers on special assignment, or whatever they call you. I'm Matthaeus Huelse.
And I'm Katie Ritter. As instructional coaches, we are often responsible for our own professional learning and can sometimes feel pretty isolated in our role.
That's why we're here, bridging the gap with a wealth of tips, tricks, and building a community of coaches.
So hit the restart button with us.
Recharge your coaching batteries.
And hopefully you'll leave feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
Welcome back to Restart Recharge. Today we're diving into the heart of instructional coaching with an episode titled Core of Coaching.
I am so excited to finally release this episode and announce this to the world and to have Brooke Conklin, longtime listeners will recognize. Brooke has been spearheading this work for us to develop a core of coaching framework based on years of our own coaching work. It's based on work with coaches in a variety of settings across the country. It's based on a tremendous amount of research about not only effective instructional coaching that leads to changes in teacher practice and improves student outcomes, but also on research around creating sustainable change within school organizations. I am delighted that we finally get to introduce what we feel has been missing in the world of coaching for a long time, and a long time in the making, to announce the core of coaching framework finally.
Welcome to the pod, Brooke.
Welcome back, Brookie.
Thanks, team. Happy to be on the pod again.
I am excited to dive into this topic and to introduce this work that you've been working on to the world of coaching. Talk to us a little bit about where did it come from? Why did you decide that, hey, something is missing? We need to create this framework.
So I guess it starts really back in, I don't know how many years it is now, but several years when I started working with coaches directly and training them on the skills of coaching. I was working with coaching teams that adopted a range of different coaching models. Mm-hmm. In the work that I was doing, we were working on really like big picture stuff, like how do we design professional development? How do we differentiate? But in those conversations, I was realizing that everybody had their own kind of unique approaches to coaching, but kind of in a limited way. When I say that, I mean I would be working with a district talking about coaching cycles, and they would adhere to a specific coaching cycle model that guided the steps to lead the teacher through this cycle of like goal setting, implementation, and reflection. And that was kind of where that specific model stopped. Or I'd be working with a coaching team and they would have had really deep training on something like cognitive coaching, which is a fantastic approach to coaching. If you're not familiar with it, it really centers around leading teachers in reflection and helping teachers be reflective in their practice. But that was really the microcosm of what they were talking about, was the reflection. I saw that we had these like bits and pieces of greatness going on everywhere, whether it was a coaching cycle, model or approach, a reflection technique, but there really wasn't something that was comprehensive of all of the work a coach does. Pairing that with some of my work with individual coaches and learning from their experiences and their challenges, I was finding that coaches who were actively like working with teachers and either finding success or failure, I shouldn't use the word failure, F word on the podcast, but maybe just challenges. And I was seeing that their challenge wasn't in a specific stage of a model. Their challenge was something broader within the coaching context. For example, a coach might have trouble gaining trust and building rapport with teachers, and that was really limiting the work that they could do. Mm-hmm. Or I was seeing that a coach had great rapport, great relationships with their teachers, but that work was really surface level. So when we started sitting down, and I use the word we because we're really collaborative on this team if you haven't learned from the podcast, and I started just brainstorming with my team about the work that they were doing and their philosophies on coaching and what was success to them in their role of coaching. It wasn't a specific coaching cycle model or a specific questioning technique. It was the big picture of the work that they were doing from start to finish within a district, starting with that like one-on-one relationship with a teacher, all the way to like actually leading large scale change across the organization. So when we started mapping that progression out and really trying to build something that would help guide coaches and leaders in understanding the entirety of the coaching role, we came up with this core of coaching framework that starts with those relationships, that like key trust and rapport, and really breaks down what a coach needs to do and what a leader of coaches needs to do to move from like trust and conversation to adopting new instructional practices in the classroom, to uniting a district around an instructional vision. The core of coaching framework came from was just this need to really capture what success looks like at every level of coaching.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about seeing all of these years of trial and error research and conversations and ideas and best practices from coaches all over put down on paper into this core of coaching framework is how it not only paints the picture for the coaches themselves, how to see themselves, but I'm also particularly excited about how it will paint a picture of how coaching can be this really systemic way to progress goals forward for the admin who oversee and work with and partner coaches as well. So I'm excited for admin to get their hands on this document that you've got put together for us.
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. I think that's one of the really cool things about this is that it's informed just as much by the experience of individuals and individual coaches as it is our work with leaders of coaches who are managing 100-person coaching teams across a district that has an enrollment of 90,000 kids. There's also been a lot of work that has gone into this document around what coaching looks like in different areas of an entire state. So we really capture a lot of diverse perspective and a lot of diverse understandings of the coaching role and what people have found success in and found challenges in. So it is really cool, and I'm excited to be able to share it with everyone as well.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit. Talk to us about kind of, I know if you don't have the document in front of you, but talk to us like high level, what's included in this core of coaching framework?
Yeah, so in this framework, the core of coaching, we're really looking at the core of a coach's work, those essential things that a coach does that is true coaching. So we understand there are tons of things that coaches do daily, like bus duty, covering for classes, enrolling teachers and students in digital technology tools, whatever. We're looking at what makes coaching maximally successful and sustainable.
When we say coaches, like what types of coaches? Who is this for?
This is for any individual who has a role that is responsible for changing teacher practice in the classroom. This could be technology coaches, content coaches, MTSS, intervention coaches. If your role is helping teachers to examine what they're currently doing and improve it for better student outcomes, this is for you. You kind of hit on it earlier, the intersection of coaches and leadership in this framework. There is a lot of valuable information that leaders can take out of this, whether they're leading a coaching team or assuming some coaching responsibility. The framework itself is centered around the act of coaching. The crux of this framework are really three domains. And what we're looking at in these domains is when we have a coach that maybe enters a building for the first time, new role, new coach, what are the essential things that they need to do to begin to change teacher practice? And then we take a look at what does that work actually look like when they get to the point that like trust and rapport is built. How do we move from, being the one that's modeling to being the one that is helping the teacher being independent in those instructional strategies. Mm-hmm. And then we scale up to how we actually change things across the entire district in terms of teaching and learning. So we isolate those into three domains. The first domain is building relationships. The second domain is sustainable change, and the third domain is organizational shifts. It really is meant to be a progression both of skills and depth of coaching. In coaching, you're not going to start shifting an entire organization, school, or district in the way that they do things if you haven't first developed meaningful relationships. So we start with that as the first point. How do we build relationships with teachers? How do we gain that trust, that rapport, that understanding, that collaborative relationship that we really need in order for teachers to have the trust in us to take risks in the classroom and to try new things? That's step one, is building relationships. Step two is sustainable change. So this is where we are moving from that small talk and we're really empowering teachers to start to be more independent in these new instructional strategies. So within this domain, what we want to see is that the conversation is focused on instruction, helping maybe find instructional resources, curating material, but then we're moving to really teach and empower teachers to lead instruction on their own. So that's sustainable change. We ultimately want teachers to be able to do it without us. And the third domain, organizational shifts, we don't want growth to happen in isolation. We can work with teachers in the context of their own classroom, and we can be doing a really great thing in second grade ELA and a separate really great thing in fifth grade social studies. And those two pockets of greatness can be misaligned and disjointed. Ultimately, what we want is that together as a school, we have a vision for instruction, for learning, for technology, for MTSS supports whatever your coaching niche is, and we're helping to advance the entire school population around that vision. So the work that we're doing as a coach is really aligned and purposeful to making movement in alignment with district and organizational goals. You'll see in the visualization of this domain, it's not linear, right? We're not starting at building relationships, check, move on, done. We revisit it. As we develop these skills, we're really oscillating between maintaining relationships, continuing to build better relationships, continuing to advance sustainable change in teacher practice in the classroom, and monitoring our alignment to school and district goals. When it is done in completion, what we should see is that there is a positive culture of growth and coaching within the school in all three of these aspects and areas.
I love that. And you mentioned in the first couple of questions about how this is different from some individual coaching cycle models because it doesn't just stop at that interaction with the one-on-one teacher. And then, you explained in the three domains how that third domain goes on to those organizational shifts and really brings in this mentality of systemic change when we're wrapping our arms around everything that can help advance our school goals. So we know that a lot of schools have done some work with Jim Knight's impact cycle or, a myriad of other coaching cycle models that are out there. You also mentioned cognitive coaching. How might any of those, you can choose one individually or speak at large, work with this framework so that coaches and admin can see that using this framework wouldn't be a pivot from the work they've already done around coaching?
So this framework is designed to be holistic. So when we talk about a lot of the other coaching models that are out there, they're fantastic. They're great models, well researched. They yield great results, but many are focused on a specific corner of coaching. So I compare it to health. If we say we want to be healthier, that can mean physical fitness. That's one corner of health. Mm-hmm. It can be mental, emotional health. It can be nutritional health, right? So what we try to do is paint what it means to be healthy in a holistic way, considering all of those corners of health. So with this framework, if a school has adopted Jim Knight's impact cycle, that is a coaching cycle model that does a great job of guiding a coach through a one-on-one working relationship with a teacher, starts with goal setting, moves into implementation, and then there's a reflection component. That is just one area of really what coaching is. So if you're integrating a coaching cycle model, Jim Knight's impact cycle, Diane Sweeney's student-centered coaching into this framework, that would most likely fall in that sustainable change domain, right? Mm-hmm. Before you can get to a coaching cycle, before you can solicit feedback about a goal with a teacher, you have to have that relationship first. You have to have the trust. You have to have the rapport. Mm-hmm. So the framework helps the coach understand what they need to do before the coaching cycle. You can integrate the coaching cycle model into that sustainable change domain. And then the core of coaching framework helps the coach to understand what comes next. Now that I'm working one-on-one with a teacher in this coaching cycle, how do I scale that to drive meaningful impact and change across the entire school? One of my favorite approaches to coaching that I've learned a lot about through working with different coaching teams is cognitive coaching. This is a question I get a lot is, well, we do cognitive coaching. How does that compare to the coaching cycle? And cognitive coaching really is that facilitation of reflection, guiding a teacher in reflecting about their practice. So that's just one specific coaching action that we can do among many things, right? Mm-hmm. So with cognitive coaching and guiding reflection, that's also going to be in that sustainable change domain. Before we can start to guide reflection, we have to develop trust and rapport. We're not going to walk cold turkey into a classroom, watch a lesson, and then start asking reflective questions. Mm-hmm. We're not going to get very deep into that reflection because the teacher doesn't trust us, right? Similar example to the Gym Night impact cycle. After we do cognitive coaching, we've guided reflection, we have a great relationship with the teacher. That can be happening in pockets all over the school, totally disjointed from one another. So every teacher is reflective, every teacher desires to improve, but to what end? What are our ultimate goals instructionally within the school? And that is where our third domain, organizational shifts, really comes into play. So you can integrate cognitive coaching into that sustainable change domain, but then the core of coaching is going to challenge you to think about how that reflection happening in 50 different areas all over the school is aligning to the instructional goals of the school and how you're making forward movement together as one organizational unit.
Love it. Okay, you are going to be so impressed because I was going to remind us that we need to take a quick break from our sponsors.
That's a fantastic idea. How about we do that? Let's take a quick commercial break and then we'll be right back with Brooke.
Calling all instructional coaches. Join Forward Edge for Coaches Camp in summer of 2025. Coaches Camp is packed with high-quality professional development exclusively for you. Attendees will work with like-minded coaches on creating strategies for building teacher relationships, executing coaching cycles, and building a culture of coaching and tech integration within their school district. There are 2 opportunities to attend Coaches Camp in the summer of 2025. You can either join us virtually July 22nd through 24th, or come to Cincinnati on July 28th and 29th. Please visit forward-edge.net/coachcamp to reserve your spot today.
Welcome back from Grabbing Snacks. We are here with Brooke and talking about the core of coaching. I wanted to jump a little bit more into the data component that you mentioned. So as coaches, we frequently have to prove that we're, 1, moving the needle, and 2, that what we're doing is valuable. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you would collect that necessary data? Like what kind of measurements, suggestions would you have for us?
Excellent question, Matthaeus. So in building this framework, it was really important to us that we weren't just putting something out there that sounded nice. Of course, it sounds great to build relationships and to listen actively and lead with empathy and to be inclusive. Those things all sound great. As you mentioned, Matthaeus, there is a level of accountability that we really need to get comfortable with in coaching. A component of this framework is how we actually measure our progress, both to show our impact, but equally, if not more important, to evaluate our impact, which are 2 different things. Showing is kind of proving what we're doing and the results. Evaluating is being more critical of the impact that we're having. And I'm always surprised that this can make coaches uncomfortable when we talk about collecting data on coaching, because it seems evaluate. And really it's not. What we're doing is trying to figure out if what we're doing is working and what it's yielding. In the core coaching framework, we talk about data in multiple ways because data is more than a survey at the end of a PD session asking, did you enjoy this? The only thing that tells us is if teachers liked it or not. That doesn't translate to student impact or outcomes. So what we want to do is to look at data from multiple angles. In the framework, we outline how we can collect data around each of the 3 domains. The purpose behind that being to measure and evaluate our effectiveness in building relationships, sustainably changing teacher practice, advancing those organizational shifts. So for example, we provide guidance and suggestions for how we can measure things like teacher trust and engagement objectively. How can we measure the frequency and quality of interactions? Are we at that building relationship stage where we're comfortable having small talk about the weekend, upcoming holidays, all those surface level conversations? Or are we actually having conversations about instructional topics with the intent to improve them? 2 totally different comfort levels when it comes to conversation and relationships. So we talk about measuring that. As far as sustainable change in teacher practice, we're looking at things like what's happening in the classroom, what classroom data can we pull to examine if that work that we're doing one-on-one with the teacher is actually trickling back to the kids. We look at student performance data, teacher self-reflection and growth, all as components of measuring our impact on sustainable change in teacher practice. The most tricky element and layer of this data is the organizational data. How do we as coaches know if we're actually impacting student learning and school goals? Because there are so many variables and factors that influence student performance and, the school's performance on those goals. So we provide some suggestions for how coaches can measure their impact and organizational goals. Stuff like leadership, engagement, and support. How can we measure the level of involvement that our school building leaders have in our coaching initiatives, and how closely aligned our coaching initiatives are to what our school leaders' instructional goals are for the school staff in the building, among a couple of other things. So those are what we call our KPIs, key performance indicators. We provide some guidance for each of the domains, but we also know that data can be quantitative as much as it can be qualitative, and that qualitative data is really valuable too. We outline some ways that you can include feedback loops as regular practices in each of these domains to capture some of that qualitative data that can be really insightful to guiding your reflection on your own coaching work and to show your impact too. And then the last thing that we encourage coaches and especially leaders to evaluate the sustainability of coaching. So when we talk about sustainability of coaching, that means that if we have a coach that's worked in a district, let's say 3 years, and that coach is removed, are we still going to see the lasting impact of the work that that coach had years down the road? What we want here is to see that coaching and progress is transferring from the coach to the teacher, to the culture of the building. I see this happen a lot. It's where coaches might do a lot of modeling, or they might always come in and teach the technology and the teacher always does the content. That's not sustainable. What we want to measure is that our instructional practices are changing, our processes, our routines around coaching, our mindset around coaching is changing, and that our organization as a whole is improving in how we coach and how we embrace things like peer coaching, PLCs, time in the schedule for coaching. We provide a little bit of guidance on that, knowing that is going to be the most difficult to assess, but maybe one of the most important things too.
And how, like specifically for that one, because the last one, it is so tricky. Do you have specific suggestions on how to measure that, like concrete?
This really comes out of that organizational shift domain when it comes to coaching. What I want to see is that it's not just the one technology coach that's providing all the learning. So how we can measure sustainability in that domain, we want to look at, have we provided opportunities for teacher leaders to maybe lead some of the PD? Have we built in systems that allow our teachers to learn from one another? Excellent example of this, and a quick plug for the EDU Coach Network. We recently had the Indian Hill Innovation Team on a roundtable, and they were talking about how they've created this this system where every Friday they have 5 teachers take a field trip and they go around the district and they learn from other teachers, teacher to teacher observations. That is a system that's built into the school that is an indicator that there was an organizational shift for sustainable professional learning and coaching within the building. So it's just like one example of something that happens when we're paying attention to the sustainability of coaching.
I really, really like this because like you said, this holistic approach, there's all kinds of different ways that you could hit some of those indicators and measure those pieces. I can imagine that maybe something like a teacher showcase would be another option to see that teachers are learning from each other. I like how it is able to flex and adjust to all these different concepts and frameworks we're already using. You did mention a lot of data being collected from different places. So who is involved in not just collecting the data, but also who is doing the analyzing and the engaging with the data?
I think that's going to vary based on the organizational structure and the size of the district. If I had my perfect world scenario, the who would be multifaceted. So the who is responsible for collecting, analyzing, taking action on the data would include the coach themselves, teacher leaders that were also equally invested in the development of their peers, leadership of the coaching team, and it would be the building level administrators. There is also a cool opportunity for some community transparency in there. Like, these are these shifts that we're seeing in the school. This is how the work we are doing on these PD days in our flex schedule is impacting students in a positive way. I think there probably is not one singular person that should be taking this all on, depending on your position, the political structure of your building. It might start with one person. Maybe it starts with you, just the coach, collecting data on the first 2 domains, building relationships and sustainable change in teacher practice. We're going to start collecting data on those 2 things, start evaluating them, start taking action on those things, and then we're going to work our way towards those larger organizational shifts.
That's awesome.
I love it, Brooke. One of my favorite quotes is, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. I feel like this core of coaching framework does a great job of helping people see the system and how to change the system to allow coaching to advance whatever the goals are that they are trying to achieve. And I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about with this framework. But we are going to wrap up with a spin on our last question. Instead of just general top 3 tips, maybe we'll have you back for a follow-up after some coaches have implemented the framework. We'll get some top tips from them.
Part
2. Part 2. Give us your top 3 use cases on how coaches and admin might actually go about implementing and using this framework for their work.
So up until this point, we've really been talking about like ideas, right? Not a lot of like maybe tangible, go and do this. One of the things that you'll find that will help you in this implementation that Katie's asking about is that within each domain, we outline key competencies and critical behaviors. So these are the key skills that you need in each domain, and these are the critical behaviors that you can start implementing into your daily coaching work to achieve transformation at each level. One of my favorite ways for coaches as individuals to use this is a blueprint for professional growth and development. We are, and I say we as the collective whole of coaches, thrown into this role with often really limited training. We might get some training on something like cognitive coaching, those one-on-one conversations. We might get some training on andragogy. We're not trained on the system of coaching. But this is a great resource to guide you from your first day in the building to your last on how you can grow and develop as a coach. This also, my second use case for coaches, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but is a great way to assess your impact. If you want to understand the impact you're having on teachers at multiple levels, so on teachers' job satisfaction, that's going to be in like building relationships and trust, right? If they feel supported. You can measure if you're having an impact on instructional practices over time, if you're having an impact on larger instructional goals. So it's a great guide for measuring the impact of the coach and really make sure that we are fulfilling our obligation to the school and the community.
Brooke, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you before you get to your third one. The way you just positioned that made me also think, you sort of touched on it before, but the framework with the way you just said it makes me think about not all teachers or the whole school, or if you serve multiple buildings, are going to be at the same level. You talked about how it's meant to oscillate between different areas of each domain depending on where you're at. It's also meant to help you with individual teachers or departments or buildings based on where they're at, and give you those next steps to progress that teacher to create that sustainable change and ultimately the organizational shift. Sorry, the way you said that got me thinking, and I just wanted to call that out with the framework too, because I think sometimes coaches struggle if it's not like every teacher is at the same place at the same time, and I don't know that they ever will be.
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. Yeah, some teachers, the moment you meet them, they're ready to learn from you, right? Ready to absorb your knowledge and try new things.
It's like the little kid who comes up and hugs a stranger.
Yes, God love them. And then other teachers, it takes 3 years. Speaking from personal experience. Yeah, you're totally right. You can be at multiple levels between teachers, schools, grade levels even.
Yeah, sorry to derail you.
No. So then my last use case for school leaders who are utilizing this framework is to help clarify the role of the coach within the school system. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so beneficial for your coaching teams. A lot of times coaches really struggle to cross-collaborate with other coaching teams. So tech coach, content coach, it can get territorial sometimes. It can just get ambiguous. Even coach to administrator, that role, we try to set clear boundaries, but sometimes that can get a little bit strange. So just understanding what role the coach plays in the entire system of the school, from working one-on-one with teachers to supporting the school building as a whole to helping actually implement these larger instructional initiatives.
I wish I knew what button was the applause.
Oh, wait, I love that.
Yeah,
Wait.
Hit the applause. All right.
Here we go.
I'm working on it. Hold on, this is it.
We
tried.
My last half point, and I say half point because it is in alignment with my advice for coaches, and that use case for leaders for this framework is that it enables you to measure the impact of your coaching program. So if we know the value that coaching is having on teacher confidence, student performance, progress on instructional goals, we're able to better advocate for support for our teachers. So things like resource allocation. A lot of times I see buildings where there's one coach and way too many teachers. It's impossible for that one coach to serve and support all the teachers. So if we want to start talking about adding new positions, we have to demonstrate the value of coaching. Another challenge is there's never enough time for coaching, right? So if we're going to advocate for more time in the master schedule or advocate for more time on professional development days, we need to be able to answer the question of what value does this give us? What's the opportunity cost here? If we are able to measure the impact of coaching and prove that it really is having an impact on multiple things within the school system, those difficult resource conversations become a lot easier.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Brooke, thank you so much for your work that you have put into putting this framework together. I am really excited for coaches to get their hands on it.
Yeah, I just think it's such a great blend of both transparency and flexibility in terms of what it offers, while at the same time giving you a clear view of how to approach systemic change in that school and a path. I think that's such a great setup. So Brooke, before we let you go, tell us, how can people find you? How can people ask you questions about the Coaching Network? How can people maybe find the Coaching Network?
But you can find me on Twitter. My handle is at Brooke, Brooke, Conklin, Conklin, 19. I'm active professionally on Twitter. If you find my Instagram or my Facebook, you're probably going to see a lot of kid pictures. You can also connect with me through the EDU Coach Network, like Matthaeus mentioned. It is a PLN for coaches. Wonderful minds inside that community. A lot of them have contributed greatly to this work. You can find that at www.educoachnetwork.com.
Thank you so much, Brooke, and thanks for joining us. The rest of you, please leave us a review. Let us know what you think, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Brookie.
Bye, guys.
Download your copy of the Core of Coaching Framework at forward-edge.net/core of coaching.
Thanks for spending time with us today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with an educator friend.
And connect with us on social media at RRCoachCast to let us know what you thought of the episode and what topics you want us to discuss next.
New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts.
So press the restart button,
Recharge your coaching batteries, and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
a Tech Coach Collective. I feel this is an out-of-body experience looking at my office from this angle.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel weird about your and John's wedding picture in the background, but